Shadows of the Past, Part 1, A Lucky Jessie Story. Once upon a time, there was a young woman named Adar who had left her ancestral village, Eze, years ago, determined to escape its whispers, secrets, and the weight of her father's legacy. Yet here she was, summoned by a letter with news of his sudden death. The path to her father's house was overgrown, winding through thick, towering trees that seemed to watch her, their shadows bending toward her like they were reaching out. The stillness around her was suffocating, making every crunch of leaves beneath her feet sound like a warning. The village hadn't changed much since she left, but now it was cloaked in a heavy silence, an unnatural one that seemed to deepen as she got closer to her destination. She glanced around, noticing the villagers peeking through doorways and behind curtains. Some stood on their doorsteps, staring openly, eyes hollow and wary, their faces lined with expressions she couldn't quite read. She could feel their gazes bore into her, a mix of pity, fear, and perhaps resentment. She caught snatches of whispered conversations as she passed. Cursed, never forgiven, sins of the father. It was as if her return had rekindled something old and dark, something that lay dormant but was now awakening. As she approached her father's house, an old, weather-beaten building with cracked walls and vines clinging to its structure, Ada hesitated. Her hands trembled as she placed them on the wooden door, its cold surface seeming to pulse beneath her touch. She took a deep breath, pushing open the door. The house was engulfed in shadows, its interior dark and cold. Dust particles floated in the dim light, dancing like spirits in the air. It felt as though the house itself was alive, breathing, waiting for her. The familiar scent of incense, mixed with something foul, something decayed, hit her as she entered. Her gaze roamed over the old furniture, the walls adorned with faded family portraits, and a strange sensation washed over her. Memories flooded back, memories of laughter but also fear, of her father's hushed conversations late at night, his door always locked. She realized then that she had returned not just to say goodbye, but to confront whatever it was her father had left behind. Unable to sleep, Ada spent the night sifting through her father's belongings. She searched for anything that might explain the unease she felt or the villagers' cryptic warnings. Her hands trembled as she found a heavy locked chest hidden beneath his bed, an object so covered in dust it seemed untouched for years. She forced it open, revealing a collection of strange artifacts, an old mask with worn tribal designs, yellowed pages covered in symbols, and a small, tarnished mirror wrapped carefully in cloth. Drawn to the mirror, Ada picked it up and unwrapped it, wiping away layers of dust. As her face came into focus, she was startled to see that her reflection was not alone. Standing just behind her was the faint image of a woman, a figure draped in tattered white, her face hollow, her eyes lifeless. The woman's expression twisted into a horrific grin, her mouth moving soundlessly. Then a whisper echoed in Ada's mind, a voice as old and cold as the grave. "Return what was taken." The words seemed to coil around her like a curse. Ada dropped the mirror, backing away in terror as the image faded. Her heart raced, each beat pounding in her ears. The mirror lay on the floor, reflecting only her pale, shaken face, but she knew something had been unleashed. The warning rang in her mind, an omen she couldn't ignore. The next morning, Ada found herself standing outside the hut of Eat, the village elder. The old man was known to be a keeper of stories, someone who remembered secrets long forgotten by others. She hesitated before knocking, feeling the weight of her father's secrets pressing down on her. When he answered, his face was somber, his gaze piercing as though he already knew why she had come. She explained the vision in the mirror, and as she spoke, Eze Nwoki's expression darkened. He sighed deeply, motioning for her to sit. Your father, he was a complex man, the elder began. He was respected but also feared. There were things he dabbled in that should have remained buried, and I fear the consequences of his actions have now fallen upon you. Confused, Ada leaned in. What did he do? Eze Nwoki looked around, as if afraid the walls had ears. Years ago, he sought power from the spirits of the land, offering them promises he failed to keep. He took something valuable, something that held the souls of our ancestors. It was a sacred artifact, never meant to be touched by mortal hands. Ada's stomach turned. Why would he do such a thing? Ambition, fear, greed. Perhaps only he knew. But that act unleashed a curse on your family, a shadow that has lingered for years, waiting. Now that he is gone, the spirits believe it is you who must atone. As she left the elder's hut, Ada felt a cold weight pressing on her chest. The sins of her father were now her burden, and she felt the pull of something dark and ancient trailing her like a shadow. That night, as Ada prepared for bed, she noticed a dark mark on her wrist, a faint, hand-shaped bruise that hadn't been there before. She tried washing it, scrubbing it with soap, but the mark remained, stubbornly embedded in her skin. It pulsed with a dull ache, a steady reminder of the curse now tied to her. The whispers began then, faint at first, like a breeze passing through the house. But soon they grew louder, voices chanting her name, calling her to return what was taken. Shadows danced along the walls, moving with unnatural grace, twisting into forms that almost resembled faces, faces of those long gone, staring at her with empty eyes. Ada pressed her hands to her ears, trying to drown out the noise, but it only grew louder. She knew the spirits would not stop until she appeased them. With her marked wrist throbbing in pain, she realized there would be no peace until she uncovered the full truth of her father's actions. If you like my story, follow, like, and comment for next part.